I'm Rikki Schlott with the New York Post, and I'm here with Christopher Rim, the founder and CEO of Command Education, a college consulting group here in New York City. And we're here to talk about test optional policies and standardized testing. So Chris, tell me, in terms of the spectrum of schools, how many schools are dropping testing requirements?
I would say virtually all of them dropped testing requirements during COVID, and they're continuing to keep it optional, except for a school like Georgetown. At Georgetown, you have to take the SAT or ACT to even apply. But at Harvard, at Yale, at Princeton, it's still test optional.
What is the rationale of these schools for dropping these requirements?
A lot of the schools are trying to level the playing field as much as possible, which is why they've kept the test optional policies. Unlike Georgetown, for example, where you still need to take an SAT or ACT exam in order to apply.
And so, do you still recommend that students take standardized tests even though they might not be required?
Definitely. For example, if you're attending a private competitive school, or you're attending even an elite public school, think about who your classmates are. Are they going to take it? And if you're thinking about applying to the same rigor or level of colleges, they're going to be comparing you against your classmates. So if your classmate who has very similar grades, extracurriculars, volunteer opportunities, and letters of recommendation, and they also have a very strong SAT or ACT score, they're probably going to get in over you. So you want to see, who your classmates are, what school you attend, and if it's a private school, pretty much everyone's going to be taking it. So I do highly recommend taking the SAT.
And is there an advantage between the SAT versus the ACT, or how do you decide which one to take?
I would strongly suggest each student taking a diagnostics test or practice test for the SAT and ACT. Take it both over 2 weekends and see which one you do better in. But also try to understand what types of questions you got wrong, not necessarily the final score. Because let's say you get 5 questions wrong, but it's across 3 different topics, you might have guessed on the other questions that you got correct, or you might not really have fully mastered each topic and question. But if you get 5 questions wrong, but it's all similar topics with a common theme, that's going to be a much easier fix. So really try to understand what type of questions you got wrong, and not only the final score.
And how much does starting early in test prep and practice help in your ultimate score?
I would say we tend to give our students the first diagnostics test during sophomore year, and then have them take the final exam, the actual exam really, at the end of sophomore year or during the beginning of junior year. That's the ideal timeline, but it's really different because for each student, let's say you're attending a competitive school and you have a lot of projects, a lot of exams at school in sophomore year, or you have a very difficult teacher and you don't have the time to dedicate to studying, I would say just wait, because with the SAT, with the ACT, a lot of it is about memorization and repetition. So if you start tutoring or self-practicing, but then you also stop for 2 months, you're probably going to have to restart the entire process again.
And let's say that you get your test scores back and they're not what you were hoping for, or not within the range of the school that you were hoping to go to. So when should you opt in or opt out of sending your test scores along?
So I would say the general rule of thumb is practice for about 6 months. Make sure that while you're practicing, you're taking full-length exams and seeing your score increase and improve. And on your final exam, on the actual exam, if you don't get the score you want, take it again for a second time. Hopefully it's improved. And if it's still not improving, depending on where you are, if you're a junior and the second actual exam you took was beginning of senior year, that might really be the end. Or even if it's towards the end of junior year and you have an entire insanely packed summer coming up ahead of you, then you might just want to disregard it and really focus on your extracurriculars, beefing up and making sure that your essays are perfect, and use that time for other things. And we've had students who've tried their best, couldn't get above a certain score, and instead shifted that time and energy into having more impact in other ways. And the student did incredibly well.
And are these test optional policies, in your view, a step in the right direction?
I don't necessarily think so, because it's giving a lot of false hope to a lot of students. Students who couldn't have ever gotten into these schools and still can't get into these schools are applying because they think they're going to get in. These schools are making so much money from application fees. Yes, more students are applying, but are they even qualified to begin with? Not really. So it's just as hard. Is it that much harder? I don't think so.